Well, greetings, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Good to see you. Our lesson is entitled Welcome to the Misfit Kingdom. I think it's going to be a fun one. I really enjoy writing this. There's a Greek poet by the name of, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Hosea, and he wrote this: If you tell me who you love, I can tell you who you are. Max Lucado, and you know him possibly a name, is a very dynamic Christian author, and he said it this way: The sign of the saved is their love for the least. Let me do one more. Here are a couple more quotes. Bill Hybels, who's a pastor of one of the largest churches in the United States, said the same thing when he said, We have never locked eyes with someone that did not matter to God. And my personal favorite is from Dr. Charles Swindoll. He said, You can tell a lot about a person by the way they treat those who can do nothing for them. Isn't that powerful? All those quotes are very powerful. The Greek poet was right when he says, Tell me who you love, and I'll tell you who you are. Jesus said all these in a parable that we take from the book of Luke, the 14th chapter, starting with verse 12. It's a little lengthy, but I want you to hear this beautiful parable because I'm going to really go and reference it throughout the rest of our lesson. So listen carefully as I read this to you. Luke 14:12. Then Jesus said to his host, When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. And Jesus replied, A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servants to tell those who had been invited, Come, for everything is now ready. But they were all alike began to make excuses. The first said, Oh, I have just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another said, I just got married, so I can't come. Well, the servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. But sir, said the servant, what you ordered has not been done, but there is still room. Then the master told his servant, Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. Isn't that a marvelous story? Just a wonderful story of loving the unlovable. Jesus encourages us with 3 truths. I want to go through each one of them quickly of what he's trying to tell us about loving the unlovable. The first one is, if you welcome misfits, you will be blessed. That's up to 12 to 14 verses he talks about. So, blessed by their faith, he said. When I was a very young boy, my father pastored a church. Every Sunday, a woman showed up with her family for worship, and they were not very prosperous. Their clothes were worn and faded, but they were very clean, and they drove an old car, and they were very quiet and very nice as they sat in church. But there's one thing that stood out about them, especially a woman named Sarah. Now, I'm not really sure what her real name was. We'll call her Sarah. She wore a very heavy, long coat all year round, no matter the weather, and she never took it off, even in church. Well, they sat quietly on the back bench during worship. And I noticed others kind of stared at them every time they came, and they would whisper and they would gossip about why is she wearing that heavy, long coat all the time, even in church? Isn't she strange? I wonder why. These and other comments became normal for me to overhear. Even my mom would speculate in the car as we drove home after service. But one day, on our return trip back home, my mom told my dad that she finally approached the woman and asked if there was a problem due to her wearing that long coat. My dad responded, "I wish you hadn't done that. It might have embarrassed her." My mom told him that it wasn't the case at this point. It was a very nice conversation. In fact, she told the woman appreciated her asking, and that she had said that she had a medical condition that always kept her cold year round, and the coat was the only way to stay warm, and she had to keep it on. She then thanked my mom for asking and caring about her. She shared that she felt God's love in worship, and especially when mom talked to her with such loving care. When I overheard this conversation from the back seat, I changed my whole view of the woman to not be so judgmental of others. And from that day on, I remember that story. I remember that image. And I looked at the family from that day on, and especially the woman, in a whole new light. I saw good people who God loved, who were just like me, but just a little different. I guess I not only can tell you the story to show you how these strange others can bless you in your faith, but also you need to know that sometimes these misfits that need to be welcomed home are not in the same class that we are. No one will be blessed with their faith if you just allow it. Allow them to bless you, that your faith will be better. But Jesus said, you'll be blessed with eternal rewards. So you glance back to verse 14 I had read to you. It says, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Well, in Matthew 25, it says a different way. Do unto the least of these, it said. So the first promise was, if you welcome misfits, you will be blessed. And then Jesus said the second promise is this. If you welcome misfits, the kingdom will expand. Now, of course, Jesus was not talking about a temporary dinner, but the story that he's alluding to is the great supper of the Lamb and to celebrate in heaven when we all will be there. But the size of the party up there will be determined by the number of misfits that we welcome down here. When we welcome misfits, the kingdom will expand. So Luke in 15th chapter says, Jesus ate with sinners. He welcomed them home. The angels rejoiced every time a misfit of God is welcomed into the kingdom. I guess the reason I tell you this story is because sometimes the misfits that Jesus calls us to love and to welcome home, they don't look or act like us. They don't always choose to be misfits. Maybe that's just what life gave them. Or maybe we make them misfits in our own eyes. They could be the person that you see regularly, but have never asked them about Jesus. It could be that person if you're possibly in a assisted living or some other apartment or something like that that takes out your trash from your room. That's a misfit opportunity. The neighbor that you would greet with just a wave of your hands, hey, good morning. It's another misfit of an opportunity of Jesus contacting their hearts. Or someone possibly right in your family that you just want to express the love of Jesus to. Now here's a third promise from these verses. Is more of an imperative rather than conditional. If Jesus says this, you must welcome misfits because God welcomes you. Ouch. Did you hear what he just said there? You welcome misfits because God welcomes you. The parable of the banquet is alluding to the original guests, the Jews, that God's chosen people. So God says to go out to the highways and the byways and invite the spiritually crippled and the lame and the blind. That's you, and that's me. We too are misfits. We too are blind. We too are lame spiritually. We too have so many issues. We too are judgmental. We too have lots of irregularities in our life that are sinful, that are not appealing to God. And God welcomes us to his home. As I grew up, as I reflect on this. I remember sometimes waking up on the couch when I had gone to bed in my own bed, in my bedroom. I knew I went to bed in my room. I remember that. But there I was waking up in another place. The first time this happened, I was totally confused, but it occurred numerous times after that, so I knew after that one time why I was where I was. The reason was that some desperate family in the middle of the night had found my dad and was told that there was a pastor that would take care of them. So late at night, they would knock on their door and be invited in to receive some food and a place to stay for the night because they were destitute. The next morning, strangers would come out of my bedroom and gather with us at the breakfast table. They would be fed, they would be counseled by my dad, and we give of what money we had because we were not rich by far. Even at other times, possibly, as another variance to this, I'll be still in my bedroom at night, but I would wake up with a strange boy sleeping next to me in my bed. And we'd go out into the living room, and our fold-out couch would be a couple out there sleeping. Even today, there's a program in a church that we attend that houses desperate families who need just a few days to get on their feet. And so they ask us, people who attend, that we would make food and come and bring that food at one evening for an evening meal and sit and eat with these strangers and play games with their children. And the church provides housing for them in a nightly way. They were always welcome. Welcome home. So many people unlike me in so many ways, but always greeted into our homes and into the house of God. A whole collection of misfits, of different people, of different backgrounds, different experiences, possibly different in all ways, but it look and with its sound. They were like Miss Posey, possibly. Now, Miss Posey, there's a story about her. Miss Posey was a person who was a vagabond, a person that didn't have a home, those who were homeless outside. But Miss Posey always sat on the edge and would just greet people and wave at them. Well, Miss Posey, this is a true story now. Miss Posey, one day there was two men, and they were traveling by, and they were Christians, and they waved at Miss Posey. They went by, and they went through McDonald's to a drive-through, and they got their meals of cheeseburgers and fries and drinks, stuff like that. Well, one of the men turned to the other and said, we ought to give Miss Posey something to eat, one of our cheeseburgers. Well, the other guy kind of thought, well, I'm kind of hungry, but yeah, I feel guilty if I don't, so let's go do that. So they go, and the scene is they're sitting next to Miss Posey on the curb as she's mouthing down that cheeseburger and sipping on that Coke. And one of the men looked at her and said, Miss Posey, do you know about Jesus Christ? And Miss Posey, with a bright smile on her face, looked up. He said, I do. He holds me every night. He holds me every night. The men were astounded. He holds me every night. So there we would go, possibly in heaven. And there we have Miss Posey's. And we have Sarah with the long coat. We have different skin colors. We have different accents. And the Lord is weaving a new mat at the door of heaven. And it says, welcome home, everyone. Isn't that a great thing to think about? Every one of you, misfits. So I want you to do me a favor. I want you to take out the notepad in your heart. And I want you to write some names down on it. The names of people that have welcomed you home, that love you. Or maybe some names of people that you have welcomed home. And when you die, I want you to take this list of names to heaven with you. Now I know St. Peter is going to remind you that you cannot bring anything of this world into that world. But you can tell him that Ray said that you could. And as he meets you at the gate, he is going to ask, what is in your back pocket? And you will say, oh, it's nothing, just a list of names. As you hand the list to Peter, he will look at them. His eyebrows will raise a little bit, and he will say, oh, I know these people. Miss Posey, Sarah, and a bunch of families with children. They were standing out back this morning when I came to work. They've been waiting for you. They were holding a sign that said, "Welcome home." I want to close with this poem I want to share with you. There's a deep meaning, and I hope you enjoy it. Called the Shoe Man Poem. Listen carefully. My alarm went off. It was Sunday again. I was sleepy and tired, my one day to sleep in. But the guilt I would feel the rest of the day would have been too much, so I'd go and I'd pray. I showered and shaved, I adjusted my tie. I got there and sat in a pew just in time. Bowing my head in prayer as I closed my eyes, I saw the shoe of the man next to me touching my own. I sighed. With plenty of room on either side, I thought, why must our souls touch? It bothered me, his shoe touching mine, but it didn't bother him much. I prayed again, Our Father. I thought, this man with the shoes has no pride. They're dusty, they're worn and scratched. Oh, even worse, there are holes on the side. Thank you for blessings, the prayer went on. The shoe man said a quiet amen. I tried to focus on the prayer, but my thoughts were on his shoes again. Aren't we supposed to look our best when walking through the door? Well, this certainly isn't it, I thought, glancing toward the floor. Then the prayer was ended, and the songs of praise began. The shoe man was certainly loud, sounding proud as he sang. His voice lifted the rafters, his hands were raised high. The Lord could surely hear the shoe man's voice from the sky. It was time for the offering, and what I threw in was steep. I watched as the shoe man reached into his pockets so deep. I saw what was pulled out, what the shoe man put in. Then I heard a soft clink as when silver hits tin. The sermon really bored me to tears, and that's no lie. It was the same for the shoe man, for tears fell from his eyes. At the end of the service, as is custom here, we must greet new visitors and show them all good cheer. But I felt moved somehow, and I wanted to meet the shoe man. So after the closing prayer, I reached over and shook his hand. He was old, and his skin was dark, and his hair was truly a mess, but I thanked him for coming, for being our guest. He said, "My name's Charlie. I'm glad to meet you, my friend." There were tears in his eyes, but he had a large, wide grin. "Well, let me explain," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "I've been coming here for months, and you're the first to say hi. I know that my appearance is not like all the rest, but I really do try to always look my best. I always clean and polish my shoes before my very long walk. But by the time I get here, they're dirty and dust like chalk." My heart filled with pain, and I swallowed to hide my tears as he continued to apologize for daring to sit so near. He said, "When I get here, I know I must look a sight, but I thought if I could touch you, then maybe our souls might unite." I was silent for a moment, knowing whatever was said would pale in comparison, so I spoke from my heart and not my head. "Oh, you've touched me," I said, "and taught me in part that the best of any man is what is found in his heart." May the Lord bless you today, all you misfits like me, to enter the kingdom of heaven together. So reach out to those people all around you, and let's make a great, grand, rejoicing moment when we all come together before the Lord. Amen.